our first question from Stephanie Chase with Digital Spy.
Hi, Randy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Fantastic.
So in 2017, you had a House of Horrors match with Bray Wyatt, and that can kind of be seen as a precursor to the cinematic matches we've seen recently. How do you look back on that match, and how do you feel about the recent cinematic matches?
I enjoyed the House of Horrors match. I did. It was different. Vince had a vision, and I felt that Bray and I did a really good job capitalizing on his vision. The difference is the crowd, the live crowd, was in an arena watching the House of Horrors match on the screen. So it's kind of a disconnect there when the fans aren't able to see the action live in the ring. I think the difference now during all this COVID stuff is that the fans kind of understand that there aren't any fans in the arena. So I think that it's generally accepted a little more in a positive light with what's going on. And because of that, I could most certainly see going forward that Vince and the WWE and all the higher-ups would do more things like this. I think it opens us up for, creativity that hasn't really been done much of in the business, and hopefully we can be the first to do some new things that, shoot a match like a movie. The cinematic matches, I think, are just starting now, and I think we'll do things like that going forward for sure, in my opinion.
And we'll take our next question from Kenny McIntosh from Inside the Ropes.
Hey, Randy, how's it going?
Good, man. Thank you.
Good. Well, listen, I want to ask you about the big match on Sunday with Edge, and obviously the greatest match ever tagline has got everyone talking. And Edge did an interview with ESPN the other day, and he had said that, when he found out, he wasn't thrilled that was going to be the tagline, but he's kind of went with it since. Can you talk about how you found out about that being the tagline, how you react to that, and does that change kind of how you go into putting the match together?
Yeah, I mean, usually if somebody calls a match one of the greatest or the greatest matches of all time, the match has already taken place. So it makes it definitely puts the expectations are very high for Edge and I. I wasn't exactly happy when I heard that they were going to be calling it, before it even went down, the greatest wrestling match in history. But I feel like at this point in my career and being in there with Edge, of all people, who I consider to be one of the absolute best workers in the business, past, present, or future. He's amazing in the ring, and with me, I feel like I have a natural ability, a natural chemistry with him. We've only had a handful of singles matches over the years, and of course, he hasn't really wrestled a true wrestling match in a decade, just about. But I think if anybody could have a great match, it's Edge and I. So I think it will be great. I think that it really, really makes it hard on us as talent because of those expectations. But I think that given the circumstances, given I believe at this point, after a few months of doing these matches, these shows at the PC, I think that the fans they go into this understanding that this is going to be very hard. So although the expectations are high, and although it's very unlikely we could have the greatest wrestling match ever, I think the fact that that pressure is there, no matter how the match goes down, I think that it makes it very, very interesting. As a fan, I want to tune in to Backlash, and I want to watch this match between Edge and Orton because it's supposed to be the greatest match ever. So I think that there's, it's a double-edged sword. There's some negative sides. There's some positive sides. I'm going to try and focus on the positive. Go out there with a guy who's very talented and I have great chemistry with, and we're going to do our absolute best. So at the very least, you're going to get an Edge and an Orton that are motivated to have the greatest match ever, and I think that's enough to get people to tune in there.
Thanks, Randy.
And we'll go next to Matty Paddock with Daily Star.
Hi, Randy. Thanks for your time. And a lot of talk just now in WWE about the longevity of someone like The Undertaker, who's racking up 30 years in the business just now. Looking back on your own career, already approaching the better part of 20 years in WWE, and in terms of your consistency and your regular appearances and your fitness levels, very rarely missed much time. Do you allow yourself to be placed in the kind of bracket that we would put, say, maybe an Edge or an Undertaker, or are you quite modest with how you view your career so far?
Oh, I've accomplished a lot in 20 years. I signed my contract with WWE in October of 1999. So I was just a kid, and when I look back at the last 20 years, they've really gone by fast, but I have so many memories. I've had career-wise, business-wise, I've had so many amazing matches. And I'm humble, I think, to a point. Because I know a lot of the matches that were considered great that I've had were because of the extremely talented opponent that I was on the other side of the ring with. I'm one of the last few guys to get to work with a lot of these old school cats that had that same mentality, like Shawn Michaels, like The Undertaker, as you mentioned before, Triple H, Ric Flair, Mick Foley, Booker T, the list goes on. As far as comparing careers, I know that I've had about 3,000 matches, and I know that although that's a lot of matches, someone like The Undertaker's had many more. Edge hasn't been wrestling the last decade, so I might have him beat as far as total amount of matches, but when it all comes down to it, I think your body of work, it's not how many matches you have, it's the consistency. And if there's one thing that I feel like sets me aside, minus a few injuries, a few, suspensions early on in my career, I've really been consistent. Vince can come to me and kind of put me in any situation, and I'm gonna do a good job. I'm going to try and have the greatest match that night, no matter where we are in the world. But that's everybody. So when it comes to comparing me to these other guys, I'll always look up to people like Edge and The Undertaker. And, I got a little more to do before I could actually compare myself to them. I'm still a fan. I've been watching the Last Ride documentary. I'm looking forward to after Edge and I have the greatest match ever. I think Chapter 4 of The Undertaker's documentary, The Last Ride, comes out. So I'm looking forward to tearing it down with Edge and watching The Last Ride because I'm still a fan. We're all fans. All the boys and girls in the locker room are fans, first and foremost. But I'd say I got a little more to do in my career. And that includes taking younger guys under my wing. Earlier in my career, I didn't give a shit, sink or swim as far as anybody else. I only worried about myself. It can be a selfish, competitive business. But recently, in the last few years, after working with Jinder Mahal and trying to get other guys over, trying to teach other guys the little things that I do well, that have made me successful and helped my matches get set aside as being different, spitting that knowledge back, it kind of comes full circle because when I was young, I had obviously Ric Flair, Triple H, but a handful of other guys that really enjoyed sharing their knowledge in the business inside and out of the ring with me because that's just what you do. And to be at that point now, it's nice to be able to give back to a business that I grew up around and that has, fed my family for 20 years. I really enjoy what I do, and I'll tell you what, everybody I work with loves the business, and you couldn't have a better group of guys and girls as far as the respect in the locker room right now than then the whole 20 years I've been there, the locker room's never been such a well-balanced place with the men and women that are in it.
We'll go next to Riju Dasgupta with Sportskeeda.
Hey, Randy. Been a fan for many years now. How's it going?
Thank you. It's great. Thank you.
Awesome. My question is, so things on Twitter seem to be really heating up between you and Tommaso Ciampa from NXT. Now, we have seen Charlotte Flair go to NXT and become the champion there. Is this something you would consider as well?
Yeah. I mean, as I was saying earlier, whatever Vince gives me to do, whatever my job is in that particular situation, I'm gonna do it. And if it's working with a Tommaso Ciampa, then I'd be all for it, because I think he's very talented, and I think that there's a few things that I could help him with, mainly to help him get a little more out of his career, because I know he's been plagued with injuries, and but I also know that he loves and respects this business. The NXT guys worry me because I see them doing such highly physical things during their matches. It's almost like they do so many physically impressive things, but those things are dangerous and they wear and tear on your career. I've been doing this 20 years, and I'll do it another decade. I just turned 40, and my plan would be to keep going until my 50th birthday. You know what I mean? And I think that I would be able to do that, and I would be able to, support my family for 30 years of wrestling under Vince McMahon because of the way that I tell stories in the ring. The facial expressions, the little transitional things that you do on the fly or you ad-lib, so to speak, during a match, those are the things that people remember. I watched a match the other day, and I'm not going to name names, but a lot of the NXT guys work like this, and it was just train wreck after train wreck after train wreck, and it was all very impressive, but when it's all said and done and the match is over, I couldn't remember anything that happened because it was just movement. It was just like big car crashes. And when you see so much of that back to back and you don't see how that affected the talent, meaning they didn't sell that move or there wasn't enough of a delay between high spots that I was able to see facial expressions and see that, oh, this guy hurts. This guy's, he hurt his neck on this spot, and then he just tried to pick up the other guy, but he couldn't because his neck, I think he's really hurt. Oh my God. Like, you don't get to invest into these matches because they're just boom, 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 one thing after another. And although it is highly physically impressive, and it's something that I don't think I wouldn't be able to do that style. A lot of these things these guys do, I'm not capable of doing, but they're going to have very short careers. And what I worry about for Ciampa in particular is that with all these big injuries he's had, and we've all had injuries, we all work hurt, we all wake up stiff after a good fight, but he needs to learn how to tell stories and slow it down and not think that the fans want to see him kill himself. You know what I mean? Like, you're only as good as the last match you ever had. Your last match is as good as anyone's ever going to. Like, I could tear it down with Edge and have the greatest wrestling match ever this Sunday at Backlash, and then the next night on Raw, I could go out there and shit the bed and have a real bad match, and nobody would remember the match at Backlash. They only remember the last one, and the way these guys throw themselves around and take bumps, out of the ring to the floor, and the human body wasn't designed to be able to withstand that type of abuse. And although the human body is capable of adapting to many different situations, and you develop like a callus to where, your body does get used to how your treating it in the ring, there's a shelf life on that. And if you only get 3 or 4 years of a career with the WWE because you did a lot of careless, reckless, dangerous moves, I think that you would have to look back and kind of kick yourself in the ass and wish that you didn't. There's a smarter way to do it. Smarter, not harder. You know what I mean? You've heard that before. There's a smarter way to do it, and I think that a lot of these guys could extend the length of their careers if they tried to worry about camera angles on facial expressions and playing the crowd. And even if there's not a crowd, knowing that the people at home in their living room watching you on TV, that's the crowd. You got to play to them. You got to think, how would I be as a fan watching this on television? And you got to use every little thing at your disposal, every little variable to try and make it to where that story is the best story you could have told at that point in time. And I would love to go to these guys because I feel like I can help them in their careers. They make it up to the main roster, and then they get paid. They make some good money, and we all deserve good money. And I just know that pay increase would make it worth their while. A lot of these guys have kids. They're married. They have car payments and mortgages. And, when it comes down to it, this is a business. We all love what we do, but you need to make money doing it. You can't destroy your body and not make any money doing it and then end up, working at McDonald's because you never went to college and you've destroyed your neck in the ring. Like there has to be a purpose, and the main purpose is getting paid. We love what we do, but you need to get paid for what you do, and to make it up to the main roster, to do these big shows and travel the world, the pay is better. And that's my biggest concern for those guys in NXT, and I would love to go down there and share a little knowledge with them.
And we'll go next to Christian Brunis with Power Wrestling.
Hey, Randy. At what point did you hear about Edge coming back to WWE, and what were your initial thoughts? As I would guess, you have so many memories with Edge working and teaming with him back in the day. So maybe you can also share one of your favorite memories you have with him.
Well, I had heard a rumor only days before the Royal Rumble that he had gotten cleared by several doctors and that he had been in the ring practicing and getting in shape. And I didn't hear that from him. I heard that from an athletic trainer that does my diets and nutrition plan, who turns out does Edge as well. And when I heard that, I called up Edge, and he was like, yeah, keep it quiet. Things are looking good. It took him a while because he had to go get his neck. I think 5 or 6 different doctors, because that injury was so severe 10 years ago. So I probably was one of the first ones to know, but I really, until the Royal Rumble, I wasn't positive that he was going to be there. They're pretty good at keeping secrets in the WWE, especially from the boys. And, tele-wrestler. So they kept it quiet, and he came back, and the rest is history as far as that's concerned. But as based on real events, when I was talking to Edge in the ring and Beth in the ring about how he was the first guy that wished me luck backstage at a WWE live event in 1999, that was a true story. That's a true story. So I think that because we had that relationship and we drove up and down the road together back in the day, we had a little bit of a bond. So when he did come back, those feelings were real. And there's even several times where him or I get a little emotional, get choked up, and our eyes start to water. And that's because we're feeling the story, because it is so real. And I said it earlier, I'll say it again. I'm very lucky to be in the ring with that man. You know, he hasn't wrestled in 10 years, but at the same time, he's better than anybody else in the locker room. As far as I'm concerned, he's one of, if not the best, professional wrestlers that I've ever been in a ring with.
We'll go to our next question from Giuseppe Di Giovanni with Gazzetta dello Sport.
Hi, Randy. How are you?
Good. How you doing, man?
Yeah, fantastic. A lot of legends like Ric Flair, Edge, Triple H say that you are the best ever. There is something that you regret in your fantastic career. Something that maybe if you can come back in the past, you will change.
Gosh, there's probably a whole list of things. I think that, first of all, I think being called the best at something, especially professional wrestling, is very subjective. You know, like I might think the best movie ever in the history of movies is The Godfather. But if you have someone that likes romantic comedies, you know, they might think it's 50 First Dates, you know, and so it's subjective. It depends on who you're talking to. But I do appreciate it. The admiration from some of the younger guys in the locker room and the kind words from the guys that have been around and kind of know the ropes. That's something that I really hold close to my heart, because it's how your peers feel about you. When I can have a match and somebody like Triple H or Undertaker or Shawn Michaels or John Cena pulls me aside and he says, "Man, you're good. That was good. You know, God, I love watching you work." That makes you feel good, and we're all human beings. We need that. You know, we kind of need the pat on the back sometimes. And then I'm one of those guys who I'm probably harder on myself than anybody else is. So when you get that from your peers, especially in this business, it's a good feeling. As far as what could I change, I think my attitude when I was, you know, in my mid-20s, I think I kind of walked around with a chip on my shoulder. I think it came across as, you know, me being stuck up or a narcissist. I think that was kind of cover for me and my insecurities. And you wouldn't think it, but a lot of the guys and the girls in the WWE locker room are insecure. We're human beings, and we're out there wearing next to nothing every week on live television. You know, you have to really discipline your way of life to be in the good shape, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally. And like in my case, I have a very strong wife, but that wasn't always the case. I didn't have somebody like I do now that, you know, I could talk to and would value their opinion at home as far as personal things go. So I was kind of lost in my mid-20s. And looking back, there's really nothing that I would change, except for maybe that chip I had on my shoulder in my mid-20s.
And we'll go next to Ricardo Vacchier with Medio Tiempo.
Hey, Randy. First of all, thank you for your time. How are you?
Very well. Thank you.
Great, man. I was wondering, you're about to face the greatest wrestling match ever, but when it comes down to your opinion, which one or which ones are the greatest wrestling matches ever that you have seen?
A very popular one that I would agree with, the Austin Rock, Rock Hogan, Brett, and Austin. There's so many good ones. There's so many good ones. I personally had an Iron Man match with John Cena that I considered to be very good, probably 10, 12 years ago. There's so many good matches, and that's kind of what makes it hard. For this Sunday at Backlash with me and Edge, you know, the match hasn't taken place yet. Before WrestleMania 25, when Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker were about to have their first match at WrestleMania, nobody knew going in, hey, this is going to be the greatest wrestling match ever or the greatest match ever. After the fact, everybody felt that way. And hell, I feel that way too. That match was tremendous. And I was in a tough spot because I had to follow that match in the main event of WrestleMania. And after what the crowd had seen Undertaker and Shawn Michaels do, it was an uphill battle for us. But there's so many good wrestling matches in my mind. You know, every night, every show, there's going to be a match that stands out, a match or two. And when you think about all the shows WWE puts on, that's a lot of top matches to choose from. You know, some people like ladder matches and Extreme Rules matches, TLC matches. Some people like 2 out of 3 falls or an hour Broadway or an Iron Man match, you know, or a straight up wrestling match. You know, there's all these different kinds of matches. So I think it's subjective, but those matches that I listed, I think those stick out for me as being some of the most entertaining. But probably Undertaker, Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 25 would stick out as, you know, I don't think there's any such thing as the greatest wrestling match ever, but I think if you had to pick one, that would probably be at the top of my list.
We're going to have time for 2 more questions, please. 2 more questions.
And we'll go to our next question from Luis Rodriguez with El Universal.
Hi, Randy. How you doing?
Great. Thank you.
Randy, how to catalog the greatest wrestling match ever when you will fight someone who stayed out of a ring for 9 years and barely has to fight in the year at Royal Rumble and WrestleMania 36?
Well, I think that the fact that everyone's calling this before it happens the greatest wrestling match ever, it puts a lot of pressure on us. The expectations are astronomical. And you're right. Knowing that I have all this pressure on my shoulders and knowing that I'm going to be in there with a performer, an opponent that has had basically 2 performances in the ring in the last 10 years. And that would be the Royal Rumble and our last man standing match at WrestleMania. 2 matches in 10 years isn't a lot of matches. And I know I had the WWE office workers go and find out exactly how many matches that I've had in that time span that he was gone, and it was 1,126. So when you look at those numbers and you look at the pressure that we're under, it almost seems impossible, and it very well may be impossible to have the greatest wrestling match ever. But all that being said, if I had to choose one guy to go out there and be all under this pressure with and have to perform to the best of my ability and leave no room for error, it would be Adam Copeland. It would be Edge. I think that we are very capable. As a matter of fact, without sounding cocky, this match won't be good. This match will be great. The question on my mind, I'm sure the question on Edge's mind and all the fans' mind and probably Vince McMahon's mind too, is will it be the greatest? And I think that going into this thing, that everybody watching, everybody that's tuning in to Backlash, they know that we're under that pressure. I've seen it on social media. I've talked to other wrestlers about it. We're really in a tough spot. But I think because of that, because you got 2 performers as talented as myself and Edge, because of all that pressure, people are going to tune in. Whether they see us shit the bed or whether they see us have the greatest wrestling match ever or whether they see us have just a great match, I think that a lot of people are going to want to see how this goes down and how we could pull off having one of the greatest matches ever during a pandemic where there's little to no fans, you know, during this situation where, you know, every show is in this PC down in Orlando, the Performance Center. It's a small building compared to where we usually run shows. You know, it's not a stadium full of 80,000 people. That would be ideal. 50 people standing ringside, chanting and clapping, even though that is going to help, it's nothing like the adrenaline rush that you get when you're performing in front of a live audience of such a vast majority of people. So I think the deck's stacked against us. The odds are definitely against us, but I think that if anyone could pull it off, it's Edge and myself.
We're going to go to our last question, please. Thank you.
And we'll take our last question from Miguel Perez with Marca.
Hello, Randy. How you doing?
Great. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for having us today. So this Sunday, you're facing the Rated R Superstar Edge at the WWE Backlash pay-per-view, as you know, having the greatest wrestling match ever. But also, years ago in this pay-per-view, you had another great wrestling match with Mick Foley in a hardcore match. What can you remember about that match in Backlash 2004?
Yeah, wow. Well, I do remember it because it's one of my favorite matches I've ever competed in. And man, what was that, 16 years ago? Yeah, that time flies when you're having fun. And I'm definitely having fun here in the WWE, performing for these audiences, these fans. We have the best fans in the world. And I remember those fans in Edmonton at Backlash in 04 against Mick. And I remember being so nervous because of all the things we were going to try and do to each other out there. And if there's anything I can say about Mick, other than being a super talented performer and one of a kind, he's a very giving talent. And what I mean by that is he made me in that match. Not only did I beat him, but he put me to the test and put me through things that I had never been through and haven't gone through since that day. And I think that match kind of solidified that, okay, this kid, this Randy Orton, this 23-year-old kid, he's going to be something someday. The company sees something in him because they put him, see something in him. And obviously Triple H and Ric Flair took me under their wings, so they see something in me. And I think the way that translates to our viewers is that I got to keep my eye on this kid. And that's exactly what happened. And then, the rest is history. I've had a stellar career, few ups and downs, but, I've been pretty consistent across the board. And I think that match is where I kind of started that process of becoming one of the best wrestlers in the world.
We want to thank everyone so much for your time today, for some great questions. We are, of course, very much looking forward to Sunday. And as always, the final word should sit with Randy. So, Randy, before we let everyone leave, in your thoughts, in your opinion, what is kind of the reason why everyone should be tuning in to Backlash this Sunday on pay-per-view and on the WWE Network?
Well, I said before, the pressure is on. I don't think there's really ever been a couple guys like Edge and myself that have been put in this position. There's been some great wrestling matches out there, and but to call something the greatest before it ever goes down, that's tough. We've really been painted into a corner, and I think that Vince did that so that he could see what we were capable of. Edge hasn't wrestled in 10 years. And between the both of us, I think we probably have 50 years of experience. So I think even though he hasn't been in the ring and even though he has had those injuries, I've had injuries too. And I think that we're both kind of neck and neck as far as two guys that are the best of this generation. And I think that what's going to happen at Backlash, why people need to tune in at Backlash, is to see what these two guys are capable of. And what are they going to do when they have an astronomical amount of pressure put on their shoulders? How will they perform? Who's going to win this match? And then what happens afterwards? It's going to be great. And we're going to do our very damn best to make it the greatest wrestling match ever.